Okay, we're live on Facebook. And also the first participants are joining us here as well.
Okay. So we could give them like about a minute or two to join in.
Yes.
Oh, I'm seeing we have a fair number of attendees.
Yeah. So Kingo, whenever you feel ready.
Yeah, I think we have a fair number. We have about 17 people in and a few more coming in, more joining in. I think we can actually just get started.
Okay, then let me welcome everyone in front of the various devices of your smartphones, laptops, computers, tablets, whatsoever to our next discussion. Welcome you in the name of Konrad Adenauer Stiftung. The discussion tonight will be about active citizenship and about the responsibility of us all in the societies we live in. And that's a topic that is, I think, very much in the DNA of Konrad Adenauer Stiftung. We were founded in the 1950s in Germany for this very purpose, to empower citizens to become involved in politics, but go beyond just political education, but going into political action, getting them there, becoming activists, becoming politicians, taking responsibility, not only in the political sphere, also in the economy, in education system, everywhere where we need leadership, where we need people to take responsibility. That is where Konrad Adenauer Stiftung is there to support those people, to engage for them and with them. And so I'm very happy to have all of you here, especially hello to the panelists joining for the discussion. Thank you, Kingma, for moderating again. And again, welcome to everyone in front of the devices. Please engage in the discussion. Also on Facebook, we've got the live stream there, also on Twitter. You can follow the conversation under the hashtags Rethinking Democracy and CAS Kenya. So please leave your comments, engage in the discussion, bring out your thoughts, and let us all talk about what active citizenship means today, what we have to do, especially in challenging times like this, but also looking forward. We see that there's always a need to transformation, for change, and that has to be brought up by the citizens. That is what living in a democracy means. So let us discuss what we think is necessary for that. So again, hello, welcome to all, and Kingo, I give the word to you.
Thank you very much, Christoph, and I want to welcome everyone that's with us today. I want to welcome our panelists. We have Editor Achieng, we have Kepta Ombati, we have Professor Kivuta Kibwana. We are very, very honored, by the way. Like, I have to say that we are very, very honored to have you here. You are, and I say this because having been a journalist and sort of having a bird's eye view on everything, I really understand and see how the geography, the environment of our civil society, and when I say civil society, more of the area in which humanity, in which the people care about humanity and carry the soul of humanity. So I want to say that we are so honored to have you today, because the three of you are just very much exemplify the idea of active citizenship, with what you do with your backgrounds, in having been in the trenches and on the struggles. Someone like Professor from as far back as the 1980s, 1990s, Kepta and his very strong intellectual orientation and understanding of things, an editor who's a younger member of the sector, but still very vibrant and very dynamic. I'm going to introduce our panelists, but first I just want to give a shout out to our attendees. Karibuni sana, welcome. We really want to have these discussions being as participative as possible. So feel free that even as we keep on talking, that you ask questions, put up your hand. We will have sessions for Q&A. I'm already seeing people have been putting up, already putting questions over there. And we shall engage with that. But first, for now, I would just like to briefly introduce our panelists. So we are joined by Governor Professor Kivuta Kibwana. He said he doesn't want us to call him honorable and governor. And he's such a humble man. Those of you who know him and have interacted with him, and just really his spirit of humility. And that's how he meant it. So Professor has a background as his background is has been a spokesperson of the National Convention Executive Council, NCC, and associate professor of University of Nairobi, Dean, Faculty of Law, University of Nairobi. He was a senior lecturer at the University of Nairobi. Right now, as you know, he is the governor of Makueni County. And he's one of the idealists that really have been able to make it in politics. And that's something that I really want to point out in a very key way, because last week it came up as a question of why don't idealists survive? Why don't they thrive in politics? What is it about? What is it about us? Why are we always failing? Why is it that when an idealist stands up and says, I want to run, people immediately laugh? So Prof has that very strong background in terms of what he did. And also his political career in 2002 when he was with the National Rainbow Coalition, when he was an MP for Makueni constituency, and later became appointed as President Kibaki's presidential advisor in charge of constitutional, parliamentary, and youth affairs in the office of the president. And then I will also introduce our next panelist, and that is Editor Achieng. And Editor comes from Kibra. She's very proud of her background and her work in Kibra. She's a feminist activist who defends human rights, and she's a founder of Feminist for Peace, Rights and Justice Center. Editor recently ran to be a member of parliament in Kibra constituency in the by-election that took place, and she ran on an Ukweli party ticket. Editor is a transformational leader who ensures that she nurtures young leadership through mentorship programs in feminist centers where they have a library, a rescue center, and youth-friendly spaces. She hosts sustainable feminist dialogues in Kibera to transform young women to understand their constitutional rights. And she says that she is an active citizen who makes things happen. And having seen her and interacted with her, I can very much say that she really does exemplify that idea of active citizenship, just really in the community, going out of her way to really just be part of helping, especially when it comes to women and women's rights issues, when women's rights issues are being stamped on. And then we have Kepta Ombati, who is one of the I call him one of the intellectual leaders of our space, as we try to figure out, as we try to really solve the question of humanity in this country once and for all. Kepta Ombati is a social justice crusader, he's a Pan-Africanist, he's an entrepreneur. Kepta stands out because he was actually the first, he founded the youth agenda at a time when the youth space was non-existent. And I think for us, for our attendees, people who are listening, I think it's very easy to take for granted when we see what a vibrant youth movement we have right now. But when Kepta and his team were starting out, when they were going to talk to people and say, we want to start a youth organization, nobody absolutely understood it. And so some of the initiatives that they set up 20 years ago, actually, we can trace them to Kepta and his team, what they did at the youth agenda. For example, the setting up of the National Youth Council, the setting up of the youth ministry, as well as a lot of policy documents. So Kepta has a very strong background. He was also in the constitutional movement. He was at NCEC, and he has been in the civil society movement as an intellectual leader, but also on the ground in setting up a lot of social justice centers, and just really making sure that that the discussion does not remain just in the ivory towers at the top. So with that, I just want to welcome you all very warmly and just say how very happy we are to have you with us. And I believe that we're going to have a very good discussion. So I think we'll actually just get into it. We'll just get into it very quickly. And I think the first question, when we talk about active citizenship, maybe actually before we ask about active citizenship, maybe let me first of all share a very quick definition, maybe for those who do not fully understand the concept of active citizenship. So just quickly, active citizenship refers to a philosophy espoused by organizations and educational institutions which advocates that members of charitable organizations, companies, or nation states have certain roles and responsibilities to society and the environment, although those members may not have specific governing roles. So it's just the concept of the responsibility that we have as individuals. And I think that's a very key discussion, especially in the context of the apathy that we have right now. So I think I'll just start by putting a question to our panelists. And maybe we can start with Editor. Just a question of what is it that makes you remain an active citizen in terms of going out and doing things that you don't have to do because you're not paid for it, especially when you're beginning. In a space, in a national environment where caring for each other, being your brother's keeper is something that is not encouraged, and in fact is something that is not encouraged and is actually something at your own expense. So for you, maybe you can even tell us, so what is it that keeps you going in that context? And maybe as you're saying that, you can even talk about some of the things that you're doing. Editor.
Wow, thank you so much for the wonderful introduction. And I'm really happy to be in this panel, especially with Prof here. And mine is sharing. And at the same time, I'm going to be learning a lot from you guys. And just to respond to your question, just looking at my background, because I was born and brought up in Kibera, and it was so difficult as a young girl and with the experiences that I got. And in our family, it was so patriarchal, plus the society I grew up in. And I had to do something different. And most of the time I had to resist because my father was so cultured. By at the end of the day, we used to take a lot of, it's called manyasi in my language. It's cleanser, our traditional cleanser. So I really hated all these things. And at the same time, just looking at how women were taken in our community. Because when I look at my mother, I would love to use my family as an experience and what made me to be who I am today. And my mother was passing through a lot, but she couldn't share because my community didn't allow her to share just because she was a woman. And growing up, and I was really hardworking, plus the background. And my father used to be so proud, but when he was talking, he used to tell everyone, I wish Editor was a boy. And I was really mad at him because I'm not a boy. I'm a girl and I want to remain a woman. And I think from that, I had to come out so loudly. And when I was 21, there was a project called Sitakimia. So Sitakimia project came in Kibera, and I used to host Sitakimia project in our house because we didn't have spaces as young girls just to sit and share our story. And I realized so many girls were really raped and defiled when we were young. And even at some point, we even shared perpetrators, and nobody was speaking about that. And when we were speaking about our story, we used to speak about the third party. And having in mind, when I was 6 years old, I was also defiled. At 16 years old, I was gang raped, and then I was pregnant. So coming from such a background, I had to be resilient and come out so loudly to protect girls and end violence against women. So building movement has not been easy. Selling ideas, my vision in Canberra was not very easy as a young girl, because people looked at me as a young girl, and nobody takes young people serious, especially on matters of ideas and changing the community. But at the end of the day, just growing up at this level, I had to do different things on a daily basis, be proactive in our community, attending different meetings, volunteering in the community, working in the community, and helping different people. And just coming with different initiative, but at the end of the day, just looking at the constitution and defending human rights. Pulled a lot of things, and people had to understand. And today, I'm really happy because I'm one of the few people in Canberra who don't experience direct violence. Apart from mass violence, I don't experience direct violence because everyone understands me better and everyone respects me as an individual, as editor. And now coming from different level, from different stages, now I had also to get into politics and just experience politics a little bit. For me, member of parliament in our community was something so hierarchical. And for me, it was a different story this time because I wanted to localize the seats. I wanted to tell young people of Canberra, this seat is within us, to break the political dynasty so that every young person can get into politics and actively make change in the community. So for me, it was not winning as much as I wanted to win. It was so difficult just getting into politics with 21 men as a young woman who was growing and also learning what was the tricks of politics. Plus, just being a woman made me so vulnerable in 2019 election. But what I liked about the election, I really changed so much. The status could change because I had the manifesto. I had the best manifesto as much as people didn't vote me. I was really lucky because I had 59 votes. I was really proud of myself. I didn't know 59 people in Canberra were believing in my ideologies, and for me that was a transformation. Thank you so much, Kiki.
Thank you so much, editor, and for really sharing your story in all the ups and downs. Like it's very, like I was telling you earlier, we were talking on the phone that I feel so humbled. Really to just add value to, try to add value to some of the efforts that you're doing, some of the work that you're doing. And I can see really how, I even understand even more fully just no wonder you're just continually powered up and really determined, because when you've been through an experience, you really don't want anyone else to go through it, having felt that pain. And so I really understand that, and thank you so much for sharing your background. So I would now just, so last week we were here and we talked about mentorship. I'm going to embarrass Kepta by saying that he's actually one of my mentors. I got into the humanist movement through some of the seminars they had in the early 2000s when I was a student, and he's been in the sector since the late 90s. Kepta, you correct me if I'm wrong. But I mean, at the time when the push for the new constitution, he was very active in that. And he's still been there up till today. So, Captain, for you, what makes you remain? Because I mean, so many people that you were with got tired along the way, said, you know what, I'm fought. Let me now go enjoy my life. Let me go eat with everyone else. But for you, I'm very curious. What is it that has kept you grounded? What has kept you remaining? What has kept you believing?
Can you hear me now? Yeah, first and foremost, Comrade KK, let me say that it's a privilege to be part of this conversation this evening. Secondly, I just wanted to perhaps break the protocols a little bit and say that number one, Professor Kibwana is also a distinguished constitutional scholar, but also an advocate. And in the profession, there's a certain difference. So it would have been perhaps best if we had him first before we begin the conversation. Secondly, I was indeed looking forward to. I think he'd mentioned to some of us earlier that he has a poem which he wanted to recite. I think it would be great to hear it even before we go into the conversation. It might help inspire us. It might help instill some wisdom in the conversation we are going to have. And you just mentioned about mentorship. I also need to. Also make the declaration here that Professor Kibwana and I come a long way, and he was my mentor. He was our mentor, even as we were setting up on the process of establishing the youth movement in this country and beginning the journey for what became a popular revolt against the autocracy of the 90s. We were very close. So for all those reasons, and because we don't get to hear a lot from him, I want to just request that you permit perhaps our good professor to go first. And if possible, we'd like to hear also that poem before we can get into the conversation. I beg to move.
Absolutely fine, and I do agree. It will help set the stage for all the discussions. And as we allow him to come on, what else want to say that recognize Irungu. There's so many others that I'm going to recognize, but Irungu is also going to be joining us. He's going to be joining us on the panel for a few minutes. Just a heads up. So for now, yes, Prof. Thank you so much for offering to share your point with us. And yes, we are. Feel free to take the platform.
Prof, you've got to unmute.
Prof, we still can't hear. Maybe Edward can help if he's there. We still can't hear you.
It's all for the suspense before the poem. Maybe if you can plug and unplug your microphone, your headset, it may work.
And now?
Yes.
Now we can hear you.
Okay, sorry. Yes, I was saying I'm really, very grateful. Kigwa, your names are like mine because I'm also KK. And thank you very much, Kepta, for meeting after a long while. And I really liked what editor said in introduction. And, those are the young people of our future. And maybe if I'd heard you like I've heard you today when I came to Kibera, I would have perhaps rethought that. Let me read this poem first. It was a poem written in 1997, during that time when we were agitating for the constitution. And Kepta was actually very central in NCC because he was the person who really made things work after we would sit down and we would plan with William Mutunga, Njoya, Kamau, Davinda, many other people. And then he would be in charge of the implementation. And really, for his young years then, it was fantastic work. And so I wrote the poem because in 1997, about April, we went to Limuru during the first meeting to decide how the constitution was going to look like and what the process was going to be. And young people are very adamant. They said they don't want partial constitutional change. They want people-driven change, and they want the entire constitution to be changed and to be overhauled. But we said, let's have some piecemeal changes, and then we shall change the constitution comprehensively in the future. And it took a long time until 2010 to get the constitution to be changed. And so I wrote this poem, Limuru 97, for Kepta Obati. And it reads, "Let us not fear man-made darkness, which wizards who trap the sun, defilers of people's spirit, aborters of progress, blood sacrifice. Let us not fear Limuru's chilling covenant of April rain, the past present of fear, joining steel hands of conviction and struggle, the grandeur of a dialogue carnivore, purity of mind and bosom. Let us not fear chiseling woman-man society, kneeling the world, arising change, God standing witness, finding the righteous way. Let us not fear death's freedom, life of the free, a virgin pregnant future, our journey of faith." So that was the poem, Kepta, those days, to appreciate what you and young people were doing.
Thanks very much, Prof. It's amazing, after all these years, how relevant that poem still is. I hope, editor, it inspires you as it inspired us back in the day. Thanks very much, Prof. Thanks very much for taking the course.
Okay, and maybe then I can just say a few things about what you asked us initially in terms of active citizenship. Like, part of why I'm in this platform is it's my citizens' duty to be in it. Because all of us are equal. The Constitution says so, religious texts say so. And because we are equal, we deserve equal participation in our communities, in our societies. And I think in our context, that is why we really agitated and we lost people. Others were imprisoned, they lost families, they lost careers. In the 80s and the 90s, people suffered so that we could have a framework which made each one of us a citizen of our country. And fortunately, President Moi asked us, what does Wanjiku know about constitutions? And he gave us a meme about Wanjiku. And of course, we said, yes, a country, constitutions are all about Wanjiku. And we therefore asked for a people's driven process, so that the process of constitution making, of remaking our country, reinventing ourselves, was itself people driven to say people mattered. Just like there was that, and there is still that very important movement in America, Black Lives Matter. And so we said citizens matter. And indeed, in the Constitution, eventually, when it matured, there was that preambular language, and indeed Article 1, which said that the owner of Kenya is the people. It is each citizen. And us, like me, who is a governor, was MP, assistant minister, we exercise delegated legislation. And whatever we do it for the benefit of the people. But I think the most important thing is to ensure within a country that the people know that it is their duty to do their own development. And we will be facilitators as politicians, as NGOs, as development partners, as whoever. We will be facilitators. And so for me, now being in Makueni, one of the most important things that I think I should try to do is to see how citizens can take center stage and can be responsible for their own development. They can have a voice, and so that they don't just come to me for handouts. I don't just tell them that this is what you must do, and so on. And to conclude, there is a sense in which I was really very happy to follow Obama's campaign, because he decided, using his experience in mobilizing poor people in Chicago, the south side of Chicago, he used that experience to crowdsource his campaign to really make people drive his campaign. And when the people were like asking, and where is the leader? He told them, you are the leader. This is all that we have got to do. We are going to work together. We are going to get this leadership together, and then we will move on. And so one can say he was a crowd leader. And so it's really a question of how do we, even as we campaign, like editor, next time, as you campaign, how do you get the people to be at the center of your campaign so that it is their campaign? It is not your campaign. You are just a facilitator. And when you win, you also remember to be a leader with them. So really, I think a lot of our citizens are absent in the public space. And so active citizenship is to see how they will come back to the center of the stage and how they will drive their own country.
That's very powerful, Prof. Thank you so much for sharing with us both the poem and then also your own thoughts. And it's interesting about that the poem talks about let us not fear, because fear is actually a very big, is one thing that is actually has gripped us in this country. And one could actually say that from, like, historically, we've always been afraid to engage, to take ownership of the space as Kenya. And so it's always like there's a way in which, as citizens, we sort of look like it's somebody else that should do it. It's somebody else that should do it. There's a fear of engaging. There's a fear in taking ownership. So I really like that you talked about let us not fear, and then also raising questions of leadership, questions of citizenship. Framing politics and as something of facilitation, rather something of simply giving people handouts and being like the county ATM. So these are really strong points. So Kepta, I'd like to just bring you into, you could respond on that and talk about your own background and your thoughts of how we are doing as a country in terms of our city, like as citizens. Are we, first of all, your perspective, like how do you think we are doing in terms of kawaida people as citizenship? What is the thing that's holding them back from really stepping out if people are indeed stepping up, being held back?
Thanks very much once again, Kingwa. Let me try to begin this conversation by framing it in 3 points. I think the first one is just the very essence of the discussion. When you talk about active citizenship, there is an underscript to that, and that's the question of citizens. And the question is whether Kenyans, in the context of Kenya, and that can be applied across the continent, whether Kenyans are indeed citizens. In one of his famed books, Mohammed Mamdani talked about citizens and subjects, and where he was tracing the political and the psychological context of the African person from the colonial period. So you cannot talk about active citizenship unless you unpack that first. Are Kenyans citizens or are they subjects? That question was at the center of the 20-year contestation for a constitutional revolution in this country that culminated in a new constitution in 2010. So in August 28th of 2010, that was supposed to be a line drawn on the sand, and we were supposed to begin a new era where every Kenyan, irrespective of their economic or social status, would truly become a citizen. And what defines what that citizen is contained in the first part of our constitution, which includes the preamble all the way to the Bill of Rights. But 10 years after the passage of that constitution, I think that remains a valid question. Are Kenyans citizens or are they subjects? And if they are not citizens, to what extent can they exercise their powers, their rights and powers as a responsible citizen over their communities and over their lives? And I think that fundamentally, that question, in spite of a very progressive and a very good constitution, remains unanswered. So the second point is that we have a three-way contestation of this space. So on the one hand, you have what Prof used to call back in the day, the political class. There is a class formed around political power. Then you have the business community, which consists of multinationals and local businesses. And I'm talking about the people who really control the economy. I'm not talking about SMEs, I'm talking about the people who control the economy. And then you have the people. And the two things that are at the center of the contestation is decision of how our commons will be utilized and the concentration of resources. So in your definition of what an active citizen is and what active citizenship is, it assumes an equal access to opportunity and equal capability to play certain roles across those divides. And what we see is that there are people who have our overprivileged, who can actually play those roles, who can be philanthropists, who can, who can impact communities, and they're not playing that role. Not long ago, when the COVID 19 crisis began, there are people who are asking, where is the first family here? Why are they not making contributions? Jack Ma from China is making contributions, so and so is making contributions. So these people are not making a contribution. The underclass, the people who live in the slums that editor was talking about, and I must also point out that actually I grew up in Kibera. The people who live in these areas have the will to be active citizens, to play their role, but they do not have the space to play that role. So there's tension right there. And I think the third point is has to do with a shared vision of what this country is. If you're going to play a role alongside of government, there has to be a certain basic understanding of where we are coming from and where we are going. And I think that where we are today, that consensus does not exist, which is what makes it very difficult for citizens or for Kenyan subjects to play their role as citizens alongside of government and the people in our authority. And so the struggle has remained pitched at the level of rights because people do not have those rights. And as long as they do not have those rights, it becomes very difficult to start problematizing this in the context of responsibilities. So I think that's where the problem is. And for me, my background, I think I just get incited by injustice. I'd retired after a professor in the constitutional reform movement delivered a new constitution, and they retired into private citizenship. But having seen the recession that commenced almost immediately after that, I was just agitated out of my retirement. So if you ask about what is it that my background and what agitates me, it's just that I cannot see injustice and I keep quiet. So I think that that's really for me in terms of trying to theoretically place today's conversation before we go to how then is it playing out. That would be my way of framing it.
Captain, I think I've mentioned to you before that you just say one sentence and everything just gets new life. So thank you so much for that contribution. It just really, it grounds the discussion. It takes it into a place that I really like how it just we're now thinking in ways that we don't usually think about when we talk about citizenship. Because yes, the question of how do you expect citizenship? How do you expect someone to feel and to have the will to take part as dynamically and vibrantly when they do not feel like they have a stake in that place? The question of how can we expect people to behave humanely and to it's like, how can you ask for my humanity when you have not even given it to me in the first place? So that is so powerful, Kepta. Thank you so much for really those thoughts in terms of the question of active citizenship and how we need to think about it, even as we talk about what needs to be done going forward, because I think that's one thing that we are always talking about. So you remind us that actually we need to continually be asking questions of the present moment and not just taking things for granted. I just want to very quickly look through some of the comments on the chat, and I will see. I see some questions coming in already. I see Marianne from last week. Karibu sana. A lot of greetings here. And I think because Kato, you've asked a question that I honestly cannot answer. Like, I'm actually at the place of thinking. I would actually like us to now bring in Irungu. He's in the chat. So maybe Christoph, you could add Irungu to just, I'd be very interested to hear Irungu's response to that, even as we try to figure it out, because Irungu has been doing some very interesting things with Amnesty International and with the Kalimani Project Foundation. So it'd be interesting for him to understand how does he, with that perspective in mind, the fact of, and knowing that there are people in our society that are disenfranchised, that don't have the almost privilege to be able to assert their rights as citizens and say, you know what, I'm going to take responsibility. So it would be interesting to, like, how do you balance that recognition and your own intention to just continually go out forward and work and work with communities and giving them the voice, not just being the one saying that I am coming here to tell you what to do. So it would be interesting to hear that. Karibu sana Irungu.
Thank you very much, Kingwa, and good evening, everybody, fellow panelists. Kivuda out, I assume, in another county, a little bit different from mine at the moment. So I also would like to start with a poem or a quote, and that's the quote of George Bernard Shaw that was was brought to my attention again. And it's a wonderful poem, and you can find it online if you just type George Bernard Shaw, A Splendid Torch. And he talks about how when he dies, he wants to have been thoroughly used up and finished, and that his life is not one of a candle, but it is a splendid torch that shines through his community work, and that if anything that he was born for was really being able to create a sense of community that is able to protect itself and to be able to advance community goals. And I was reminded of this because Saturday I was extremely tired, and I'll explain that story in a minute. But I'm here really sharing some experience from the honor, the service that I provide as the Amnesty International Executive Director, but also in my own community, the Kalimani Ward, where we have a community foundation that, like everywhere across the 47 counties, we are challenged and hunted by this dreaded bug that seems so small that we can't see it, yet so dangerous that it has brought big economies to its knees. So if I could just share a few thoughts, and I think, the point that's been raised by, a number of the speakers, Kepta and Kivuda also, in terms of our starting point has to be the 2010 Constitution. Article 1 creates not just a license, but an obligation on us to be active citizens. And for many people, including refugees and people who are undocumented, they don't have the legitimacy of documentation to act as an active citizen. But I think for Amnesty and others, we see these rights essentially as being not granted by states, but essentially claimed in activism on issues that are important to us, whether it be domestic violence, whether it be reproductive health rights, whether it be the right to education, health, and food. But these are essentially opportunities and I guess obligations for us to push for. So as Amnesty, we, if I look back, over the last 6 weeks or so, we have spent, 1 week focusing, a couple of weeks focusing on violent policing and how to reduce the levels of violence and brutality that our police service officers think are necessary to flatten the curve. We have spent a lot of work and time focusing on how to create mandatory quarantine centers that are dignified, that are respectful, and that are effective against this virus that requires distance and also a certain controlled environment in order that the virus does not leap from one of us to the other. We've also last week spent a lot of time focusing on forced evictions in Karibangi North. And one of the things that struck me in this work, and maybe I can add one more, the first week of our COVID response was really trying to press the Council of Governors, the Ministry of Water, and the presidency to focus on a moratorium against disconnections for electricity and water provision, so that we will be sure that those people who are living in poverty, as their daily wages begin to dry up, they at least have some minimum infrastructure to be able to be protected at this time. And I guess one of the reflections that I have for this group is that, first of all, that, you know, if we remain in action, if we remain propositional and we remain convinced that the state has agency and that there are officers within the state, both at the national level and at the level of county governments, that there is a possibility that we can confront everything, including the multifaceted challenges that come with a pandemic. The second recognition is that inequalities and corruption and impunity do not disappear in a pandemic. The pandemic essentially arrives in an environment in which is dysfunctional, and a system that ensures that many people who need universal health coverage, who don't have access to food and water on a daily basis, that those contradictions will be manifested in this period also. And if anything, they will be worsened by an external threat like COVID. So there are challenges that come with the systemic, I guess, failures of our economy and our society at this point. At the level of the Kalimani region, and this is Kalimani ward, and let me just tell a little bit of a story. On Tuesday night, the Kalimani police arrested 17 women who were begging for work, not for food, begging for work on streets like Moringa and Oleodume and Elgeyo Marakwet. And they were essentially, these are what some people call Dobby women. They are women who are contracted on a daily basis for anything between 200 and 300 shillings to clean other people's homes. And I spoke with women that have been doing this for up to 10 years with no change in their station of life. 54-year-old women side by side with 20-year-olds, essentially hoping that they can get a daily job. And for the last 2 months, these women have received not a single day of work, but every day at between 9 o'clock and 6 p.m., they come out onto the streets of Kalimani, hoping that somebody would be brave enough to give them an opportunity. And it's been 2 months now. Their rents are in arrears, their food situation is fragile, and they are desperate. 17 of these women were arrested on the instruction of Kalimani residents, and they spent one night in the police cell and were released the next morning with, of course, no charges to bear. But essentially, they had been, first of all, had their liberty deprived, and then secondly, they had put in a situation where they too would potentially contract a very dangerous virus. And many of them have no health insurance. Many of them have no capacity to respond, unlike maybe some of us who are on this call. On Saturday, and I'll skip the bits in between, but we have started now looking at this in the context of a community foundation called the Kalimani Project Foundation. On Saturday, I returned, as I was driving through the neighborhood, I found a group of up to about 50 women running across the road. So I stopped the car, my wife jumped out and asked, what's happening, what's happening? And they said, the police have just arrested people who are giving us food. And I said, what? And they said, yeah, people are giving us food. So we had to, first of all, on the corner there, hold an impromptu community town hall to just discuss what should be done. We're all wearing masks. We're all 1 meter apart. After a while, we were able to get people to remain some social or some spatial distance. And what had happened was a group of 5 friends who had been driving past these corners on a regular basis had come together, and they had raised enough money to give 50 homes enough food for 2 weeks each. So they stopped at the side of the road and they began to give out the food. They had got halfway through, and then the police came and arrested all 4 of them, and took them to the police station. So I made a phone call to the chief and requested him to call the officer, I guess we call him now the station commander for the Kalimani police station, to release these people and essentially to find a way of getting us into contact with them so we could find a more structured way that did not involve stampeding and tension between the women's groups that are now just desperate to go home with something to give their children. This morning, we registered 300 women at the office of the Deputy County Commissioner, just near Westlands. And we're now structuring a system where Kalimani residents can give to a central mchanga, which can then be given to a group of 300 women to support them during this period. And I tell this story in a bit of detail because, as an anecdote, it really exposes the inequalities that COVID has found. Secondly, also, it creates, I think, a question among us, really, which is, how is it at a time like this that the police could be criminalizing people who are hungry and also criminalizing people who want to give to those who are hungry? And I sympathize with the OCS, and I told him, listen, you know, you are in an interesting position. The public health guidelines require you to be able to manage distribution in a way in which it does not lead to the stampede that we saw in Kibra. But at the same time, the only tools available to you are to arrest the philanthropist and the person that is in need. And there has to be a way in which citizens at this point rise up and provide a system that allows for this transfer of resources to happen, but most importantly, allows for women and men who are increasingly being undignified by the lack of opportunity, by the lack of livelihood, to find ways of being able to work and receive a livelihood for that period. So I'm going to stop there and maybe leave you with just three challenges I think we have at this point. The first is this, is that at a time like this, in particularly with a pandemic, there is no time for fatalism or a sense of cynicism on our part. We have to demand of government that they have agency, they have resources, and primarily our taxes must be used to protect the very vulnerable at this point. The second demand that I think, the second learning that the second lesson that we can adopt is that it is not enough for us to want to make points, to express opinions on our WhatsApp groups, on our Facebook pages. We have to bring into our language the language of action, the language of collaboration, the language of building consensus between ourselves as citizens and people, and secondly, between people and state officers at this point. And if we need to bring that urgency to also ask state officers to talk to each other so that we don't have three different types of government agencies acting in a way that we saw in Kariobangi North last week, where we are trying to flatten the curve, but another agency is flattening people's homes, and ultimately the police are flattening people. We have to choose which is the enemy at this time. At least when I say we, I think the government needs to choose which is the enemy that we're working on at the moment. Is it flattening people, flattening their homes, or flattening the virus? The last one is this, is that we have to be audacious, we have to be bold, and we have to be fearless when we speak truth to power at this point, because if we don't do that, we will see the kind of crisis that we saw with our mandatory quarantine centers. We will see the kind of crisis that we've seen with police officers extorting bribes from people and threatening to throw people into a 14-day mandatory quarantine when actually the only thing that they have done is violate a curfew or fail to put on a mask. So I think I'll stop there and hope that I have energized and provoked conversation for this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Irungu, and I'm so glad that you were able to join us. Please don't go because there's something that particularly that I'd like to place to you, but I just want to thank you for this particular point. And again, you raise the issue of how do we expect active citizenship when a large number of the citizenry does not have the power to assert their rights. You bring out issues of force and violence. Yvonne Award say that the languages in Kenya is there's violence and silence. I think I'm paraphrasing, but violence is something that is so, it's like in our DNA. It's our go-to reaction for everything. When the first day of the curfew, the way people were treated, and that's something that is an issue of the soul of this nation. It's an issue of the soul of this nation, our culture, the way we do things, our immediate approach is like, it's just all about power and violence, and it's like I think we're a traumatized country, and so as a traumatized country and system, the systems knee-jerk reaction to everything is to hit back and to traumatize again. So those are some very interesting things that you bring out. And I'm actually glad that you say you talk about the need to demand, like talk about our taxes, because for someone like me, I look at it in terms of the bigger picture of how our society is structured, how our politics is. I don't expect our politicians, I don't expect the government to care about people, because the way our politics is structured, it is all about winning elections, it's all about power as an end to itself. And so I just, so maybe that's this for me, that I don't place my faith in those systems to work. But then the question would then be, what would then happen next? I think an example of Professor Kibwana and what he's been able to do in his county, and that's why he's such a leading light, because he is an example of a leader that leads with a particular spirit. And I think we don't talk about that enough. We don't talk about the soul of leadership. We don't talk about the spirit of leadership. He embodies humanity. He embodies caring about people, versus the other kinds of extractive and exploitative kinds of politics that we see. So I'm going to come back to you with a question, Irungu. But for now, I'd also like to have I'd like to have Professor just give a response to what Kepta and Irungu have said, and particularly in the idea of like what Kepta said about that Kenyans, we actually still are subjects. So, but how do we maneuver with all that? Like, because rather than remain there, so what next? What do we need to do? So it'd be just to hear Professor's answer to that, and then editors.
I think in terms of what both Kepta and Irungu, habari yako, what they have said, and also what previously editor did say, the Kenyan is in a bad place. And it is true, the characteristics of a citizen, what must happen so that one is a citizen, so that one has a voice, so that one is not afraid of any power in their country, so that one gets the proper information so that they can make correct decisions, so that leadership accepts that it has been put into that position by the people, and it should serve them, not intimidate them, not disappear them, as it were, from the political space. I think those things are correct for our country. They are correct for most of our continent. And of course, Kepta talked about three classes of the political class, and I mean that class, the business class, and he said he's an entrepreneur, but he distinguished, he said there are smaller ones and there are bigger ones. But in terms of the political class, we actually use tribalism, negative ethnicity, to take away people's citizenship. So that I feel if people from my tribe are in power, I'm in power, and they represent me, even when things are not going right. So the characterization of people, citizens, or subjects, part of what makes them subjects is they are tribal, or we are tribal, and we are duped into following tribal leaders, and as a result, it is not easy for us to come together as the entire Kenyan people so that we can demand certain things. And if it is young people, a lot of them, because of the desperate situations, they get into activities which actually make them not be present. Because like where editor said and Kepta, where one has grown from, there are many young people, life is so hard, you have no employment and so on, and you begin to get into cheap alcohol and other drugs and so on. And therefore, you take away from yourself even the possibility of becoming a citizen who demands from people. And I think there's one book I was reading where a lady who was in charge of what here we would call domestic workers made them so powerful because they were organized so that they demanded rights where they work, like what Houghton was describing, so that those ladies are able to create an organization which legitimizes them and which makes what they offer to be of clear value. And I think a lot of our people on the continent, that aspect of organization are not necessarily just being organized by political people, by NGOs and so on, getting into the realm of self-organization towards self-reliance. One thing that I've learned from Makueni is everybody wants to become a citizen, especially if they see there is space for that. And for example, the deputy governor in Makueni, Adelina Mwao, has done some work with the children. And she got children to speak their mind about what kind of Makueni would they like, what are the problems that they have. And the one perhaps expects that children would not be able to talk. And she was surprised, almost traumatized by some of what they said. Like they say, we go to church and some pastors abuse us. We go to school and they can tell you which teacher abuses them. In our homes, they can pinpoint which parents abuse, which relatives abuse them. The women told us we don't want, like during budget making, we don't want to, we want our own space also to talk like women and to say the things that we want, not always to be told, come to public participation with all the men. People living with HIV/AIDS, they told us that, they really want to tell their own story and to be respected, not to be discriminated. So it is also the question of how do we create, what happens so that people accept that they will not be penalized by their engaging in active citizenship, by saying we are a citizen, we count, even we vote you into positions, and therefore it doesn't end with when we vote for you. That's the beginning, so that we can work together towards our upliftment. And that's why in my own situation, I was ready to stop being a governor when the MCAs in the first term said that I must concede 1 billion shillings for about 100 of them, plus the workers in the assembly. And the rest of the 1 million people were going to get, I think that time, 4 or 5 billion shillings. And I said, if this is what must happen, I don't want to be a governor, because I am going to be a lie governor. I'm not going to be truthful to what I said I wanted to become a governor for. And so, although we are talking about the political class and we are talking about, the upper classes, the Walalahai and Walalaheri, and of course we are talking on behalf of the Walalahoi. But I think for change to happen, we have to go to the situation where that quote lower group is able to say that we are part of this society and we are going to demand that we get our resources, our rights, our citizenship. And I think for some time the organization for economic empowerment has been lacking. And I think until we even during these COVID times, we ask, yes, there is COVID, we should not be near each other and social distance is important and we should think of post-recovery programs. But what about now? Because people cannot live, they must live now before they reach the post-COVID. So what is it that is to be done given the problems that there are, so that also the person that Irungu said can only afford food for 1 day, like when they don't work 1 day, 2 days, by 1 week they are flat. So I think these are serious questions, and all of us require to address them. And I think even to ask ourselves, yes, we need the 2010 Constitution. And it said, this is what must happen. Is that happening? Why is it not happening? What can be done to make that happen? Because that is securing not only the future of those who are underclass, but it is securing the future of all of us, because we have seen what happened in North Africa. We have seen many spots all over the world where citizens in frustration are rising, but of course, sometimes there isn't a lot of direction, and ultimately the same people come back and are in charge, and there is no change.
Thank you, Professor, for just sharing that and what's happening on the ground, and really what you're doing about self-organization, and self-organization, self-reliance with the people in Makueni. And a very big issue of class comes up, has really come up, the idea of, and again, yes, the issue of citizens and subjects. I'd be interested to just hear from editor's perspective, how, particularly in this time of Corona, what is the situation like in terms of how are people participating? For example, a lot has been said that is going to happen in the informal settlements, the idea that there's going to be increased crime, but then there's also people that are really coming out and giving to, I mean, even not just from wealthier places, but also within. So it'd be very interesting to hear about what is the situation right now, what is the environment like right now in Kibra, in terms of just really people's participation, how people are interacting among themselves, and how just people are coping at this time?
Thank you so much. First of all, I want to acknowledge the efforts of different organizations like Shining Hope for Communities, a Feminist Center, individual activists like Moses Omondi, because they're here and they're listening, Steve Zusa, Pauline Juma, Yasmin, and Mweni, because these are guys who have been in front line to come up so actively and work for the community during these pandemic times. It has not been easy in Kibera, and as you understand Kibera so well, most of us, especially the adult people, and specifically women, are not literate enough to understand the COVID situation. So during the COVID, when COVID started in Kenya, we had different rumors because people were saying we are African and this thing cannot affect us. And that is the first rumor that came in Kibera, and everyone was comfortable. So when we are trying to do sensitization, when we are trying to create awareness, first it was so difficult because we were not adhering to the government measures like keeping distance, wearing mask, and washing hands all the time with soap and running water. And if you look at the situation right now in Kibera, where we stay, most of us, we have one room. It's a 10 by 10 room, and we stay more than 4 up to even 16 families in the same room. So as much as we want to adhere to these laws and we want it to be practical and work for us so that we can prevent coronavirus, it has been also difficult. And when you look also in Kibera, most of us eat from hand to mouth. So the situation is worsening on a daily basis because we cannot work from home. We need to go outside, we need to go from Jengo to work so that we can provide meals to our family. So the situation is different, and so many people are really languishing in poverty. In terms of even, it's difficult for families to put food on the table. Some families are not even, they cannot afford even one meal. So with the help of different people, at least we are managing as much as it's so difficult. And also just looking at the cartels, and there is where the Constitution 2010 comes. whereby everyone is protected with the same constitution. But in Kibera, water has been something else. Water is a gold in Kibera. The cartels are taking advantage of the situation, raising up the water, money to buy water. So it has been also difficult to access water. So even us, when we want to buy water for women, because this is what we've been doing as an organization, we go buy water outside there and bring for women. But women inside the village, the water tanks, the water lorries cannot get inside the village. So again, even us, we need to deal with the same cartel just to beg them and provide water for women. So that has been the situation. And I just want to go back a little bit. I'm not good in constitution, but I want to acknowledge that we've been having constitution reforms for the longest time, and amendments all the time. But this is the time whereby we as Kenyans should come up together and voice up and ensure that we have the same constitution in our local and vernacular languages. Because this is where we miss. If my mother cannot read English, maybe she cannot even understand Kiswahili better, but in her vernacular language, because she can read a Bible in her vernacular language, it will be also possible for them to read constitution and understand it well. So the government of Kenya should be flexible enough moving forward to localize the constitution so that everyone can understand the constitution to avoid the limitation of human rights. And also ensuring that the constitution is properly implemented, especially at grassroots level, to equalize everyone so that we can avoid the issue of classism. Because we've been seeing what has been happening in Kenya, some people taking advantage of even the law because they are member of parliament, because of their senator. We can even, not in a bad way because this one went viral, we can even use Babu Owino, what happened recently. It was really bad as a young person just to shoot somebody because he thinks and he feels he's so superior than the law. So we also need to ensure that we push the government as active citizenship and just give that also understanding that change is gradual, pushing it so harder, but in a mind as activists that change is gradual, so that it will take a lot of time, but at the end of the day, we are going to achieve. And going to my last point, also just urging young people to be so active. And when I got into politics, and I know Professor is going to agree with me, politics is intentionally violent for young people and women. It is intentional so that we can fear, we can have political apathy as young people, so that we can be scared and get away, so that other people can get into politics. So just realizing that, and I want to make young people to grow when they are loving politics and politicize everything. That's why I love feminism space. We politicize everything. If you're talking about patriarchy, we are so sensitive and getting in depth to look even where does patriarchy manifest and how can we kill it before it comes out and even bring more harm to the community. So just urging everyone, and these are the 3 slogans that we've been using as a social justice center. In liberation, we need to organize ourselves. We need to educate each other. The little information that I have as editor, how am I giving back to my community? Like now during the time of COVID, I really understand because I can read a little bit of English. So when I go back to the community, I can use Sheng and Kiswahili just to educate my community to understand what is the situation, what are the prevention measures, so that everyone can understand. And with my little networks, just going ahead and also bringing different synergy, bringing different networks, so that at least the people can afford water, food, sanitary towels, and other things just to prevent coronavirus to spread in Kibera. And also to ensuring that everyone is liberated. I am a free woman today because I decided to liberate myself. I decided to really sacrifice. And when we're talking about feminism, as a feminist activist, is a lot of sacrifice, because even the people we are in the struggle sometimes even will doubt you. They will question you a lot without understanding that we have choices in life. So it's sacrifices for anyone who wants to be an active citizen in this country. We need to sacrifice a lot. Like during this COVID, I've never seen my children for the last 48 days. This is the 48th day. Because I wanted to sacrifice so much just to go outside in the community, because I know my potential as a young person, and also understanding the background that I'm coming from, and our women just going outside every day in the morning, coming up so late, like 8 p.m. The advantage is I've really built the relationship with the policemen in Kibera so that I cannot be harmed. So it is a lot of sacrificing every day when we wake up, and we need to move with a lot of synergy to make this country better than we found it. And thank you, Professor. You are loved by so many people. Struggle continues. Asanteni.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much, Editor. That's so inspiring. And just really, what you're doing is completely exemplifies servant leadership. So thank you so much for that. So I'll have a question for Kepta and Irungu, and then we're going to read out some of the responses from the chat. But also, just before I go that, I say that, I just want to say that, yeah, Editor, you actually mentioned the role of companies, organizations in terms of, because we've seen a lot of them really trying to contribute and set aside money to support those that are not able to. So that's an interesting thing. And also again, what you mentioned about Babu and what happened, and the fact that as a society, things like that happen and we just continually let them slide. And it takes us back to the question of culture, the question of what do we allow? What are our, this cannot happen in this society. And I feel it's like we're very lenient. We're like, whatever can happen. It's okay that slums are around all these years after independence. It's okay that people sleep on the street. So I think even moving forward, that idea of culture and what we allow is something very key. So thank you, Editor. Kepta, I'm glad you brought out the issue, the question, you problematized this whole discussion. And I'd be interested to hear in terms of strategy, what do you think is the best way? Because yes, people are born in certain circumstances, but what next? Because I don't think anyone wants to remain a victim. So it's a question of what is possible from your perspective, what should be done, what could be done. Some people, we have perspective, some people believe that the government should continually be pushed. Other people believe that this government and this structure, the political structure, is set in a certain way, so nothing can happen. But for you, in terms of moving forward, what can be done? What is possible for people who are born in places where they were deprived, for people who were born and they feel disenfranchised, wanavumilia, for them, it's an endurance to be Kenyan. So what for them, for those who are listening in, what should be done? What should they do? And what should we as a group, as a sector, what should we be trying to do and work on in terms of moving forward?
Thanks a lot, KK. I think that's really the big question, but if you permit me, let me just make a few notes. Number one, I think we've made very good progress in distinguishing between a citizen and a subject, and I just wanted to drive the point home. So in terms of the contradictions there, why actually even bringing up the question of role and responsibilities becomes a difficult point to discuss with the water Prof called the Walala Hoi, is because the responsibilities as they translate on the ground is that Kenyans are supposed to pay, number one, pay taxes, two, provide cheap labor, and three, legitimize the ruling committee. The government is nothing but the committee of the ruling class. So Prof talked about ethnicization of politics, tribalization of politics. Kenyans are balkanized along tribal lines because the underlying conceptualization for the ruling elite is that these are vote banks. They are vote banks. For what purpose? For legitimizing the committee of the ruling class. So in the contestations within the ruling class, they need one group against the other needs to be legitimized. And that's the role that the people play. But if we are to have proper citizens, what would be the characteristics? Number one, citizens would have rights. And like Autumn said, those rights are not granted by the government, they're inherent. So the role of the government is to respect them and to protect them. That doesn't happen in Kenya. And in recent cases, we've seen that from Kariobangi, we saw it in Madare 4A, we've seen it all through this pandemic. Number two is that the people own government. In Kenya, the government owns the people. The government owns the people where people are in a political economy where people are not citizens but are subjects. So that if we transform the society, then it's the people who would be owning the government. And I think that is, we can see how a government that is owned by the people looks like when we look at Makueni and the Professor Kibwana project down there. So that's what we expect. The governor goes consulting, he has established structures to talk to the people irrespective of their economic or social status. And he takes on board their concerns and it shapes the county's policies. That's what we would expect all the way to the national level. Number three is that the people own resources. In this country, every time there's a crisis, you hear people saying, "Serikali saidia," which means the people understand that they do not own the resources. So the commons, the resources that belong to this country, under a regime where you truly have citizens, would be owned by the people. And when you achieve that, then the people would have a sense of ownership and can play their roles and their responsibilities in protecting their communities, their resources, and their government. But today, when you look at what is going on, people actually do not feel a sense of ownership, and that is why they vandalize. Government builds something in no time, like now they're putting all those things along Ngong Road, all those barriers and so on. You are sure that people are going to cut those things away. Before end of this year, they'll be gone. Why? Because people don't feel like they own the country. Number four, very quickly, is that people are respected as humans. In this country, you are respected because of the position you hold or what you own. People are not respected as humans. In a country where you have citizens, and you can see that in other countries, you can see that in the West, the way people are treated under this crisis here in Kenya, and the way people are treated in Italy, in Spain, in UK, in US is totally different. Those are citizens. Here in Kenya, you have subjects. That's why people can be beaten up, people can be rounded up, people can be forced into holding grounds called quarantine centers, people can be forced to pay for living in this quality environment. They are not respected as human beings. And finally, is that people have choices. You have a choice on who to become, where to live, what to do. In this country, people don't have those kind of choices, and that's why they are subject. So, and point number two is that in terms of active citizenship, actually there's nothing dramatic or new in that concept. The African communities, cultures are very rich with that concept. When you look at a concept like Ubuntu or Utu, it's founded precisely on that philosophy. It's because we believe that I am because you are. This can be contradistinction from the Western worldview or conception. And that was summarized by the French philosopher René Descartes in his famous maxim, cogito ergo sum. The English expression of that is, I think, therefore I am. That contrasts sharply with the African understanding, because the African understanding is, I am because you are. So we do not need to be preached to. the African people need to get the government off their back. They need to break the chains. They need to become who they were before the state, as we know it, was imposed on them. So that takes us to strategy. In my view, the corona virus pandemic is a tragedy, but we need to look at also the positive side of it and the benefit. Number one is that it has helped to expose the weaknesses, like I think it's Otonu was saying, the weaknesses of our government. But it has also helped us to expose the weaknesses of capitalism and the market. We now know the things that the state can do and the state can't do, but we also know what the market can do and what it cannot do. So they've been exposed in a big way. And it's not just locally, it's not just Kenya. This exposing has happened all the way. And there's nowhere where it is more dramatic than perhaps the embodiment of what a capitalist state is, which is the US. So we need to accept that post-corona, we cannot go back to that old normalcy. We have to create a new society, which is founded on the people and not on capital or markets. This pandemic should be a trigger to complete, in Kenya, this pandemic should be a trigger to complete the revolution, which took a pause in 2010. We have a very good constitution. We do not need another constitution. What we need is to overthrow the dominant political culture that exists and get people who truly believe in the new constitution to implement it. We do not even need these things that are going around talking about BBI and about changing the constitution. We first need to implement the constitution as it is. There are weaknesses within this constitution, but if it were implemented, for sure, we would transform Kenya from a country of chatels or subjects to a country with the citizens who can contribute to the development of strong communities, strong, resilient communities, that when a crisis like the coronavirus pandemic comes, when the crisis arrives, you have societies or you have communities that are strong enough to withstand the storm. Right now, we do not have that kind of those kind of communities because the state has been a predator state and it has been preying on the people. That's why when you shut down the country for a month, people, it's chaos. And that's what Editor was talking about, people who live from hand to mouth, because that's what we've turned majority of the 47 million Kenyans into, by concentrating the wealth of the nation in a few hands and leaving other people living very precarious lives, what Noam Chomsky calls the precariat. That is what Corona has helped us that's what it is exposed. And so the strategy going forward really has to be the underclass, the Walaloi that Prof was talking about, leading the next phase of the struggle and overthrowing the state as we know it right now to unlock the full potential of the country and unlock the potential of the people to build strong and resilient communities for themselves. That's, in sum, that's what I see. Thanks very much.
I love that. That's very, very well outlined and just very well thought out, and that's very strong. Thank you, Kepta. And I think as even later on as we wrap up, we'll be able to give you an opportunity to talk about what you're doing, your different initiatives with the Zinduka Foundation, so that people that now the participants that would want to plug into some of the initiatives of what you're doing can be able to plug in. And I think we have such a good variety in terms of as guests, because you all sort of you represent different different intervention points and attempts of engaging with the idea of active citizenship. So CAPTA organizing like from the grassroots and just really looking at it from that perspective. Editor just very much within the community and doing and responding to situations just really on a very much a needs basis. Professor organizing within a political system and showing the country just that a different kind of politics can be done. And in Rungu, the interesting thing that, because having sort of worked with you and seen some of what you're doing, I find it very interesting, your approach, especially like with what you've been trying to do at Amnesty and trying to get membership, trying to get members on board, and making it more of a membership kind of program rather than just sort of like from the top down. So it'd be interesting to hear your experiences. How has that been? What has the experience been like? Has it been successful? Like maybe some of the participants listening in, is there something that they could borrow from? Yeah, so it'd be interesting to just, if you could just share your thoughts on that, your insights.
I believe we're kind of coming towards the end, so that I will also maybe make some closing remarks. First one is back to editor. Editor, sister, you may not be a lawyer, you may not have got a PhD like Kivuda Kibwana, but you are the Constitution. And it sounds strange, but the Constitution lives only in the minds and actions and the way of being of citizens and state officers. So you are the Constitution. The Constitution dies that moment that you are not familiar with the Bill of Rights. And for everybody that's listening, I'm talking to you also. You are also editors out there. This Constitution lives only if we are prepared to protect and promote it in the actions that we take, whether we are paid to do it or whether we voluntarily call it into action to resolve complex issues that we face, whether it's discrimination or violence or the safety that we need to see everybody have. So I think the second, it kind of relates to your question, Kingwa, because, you know, I joined Amnesty, it's now 2.5 years ago almost, and I joined essentially a non-governmental organization. I did not join one of the largest movements of human rights defenders across the world. 8 million human rights defenders are proud to associate with Amnesty's work. But we somehow in Africa, we have not reduced, but we have turned what is a popular people's movement for human rights and democracy into a NGO that somehow we see over there, not linked to us. And, you know, the conversations were very difficult. And Kingwa, you know this because if I can just out you a little bit, but I'm sure it's on your LinkedIn page. As somebody who has worked for Amnesty and built the movement also, it is really the power of Amnesty is in people's action. It's in citizens' action. And there is no power that comes from 15 members of staff, a budget of X, that is anywhere comparable to having a movement of 17,000 supporters and 700 members, which is what we're currently at, because that's what we can bring to the political discourse that Kepta is talking about. Now, we've spent this year really thinking about, okay, now we have a recruitment model in place. How do we engage members so that when you know, Kariobangi North, 9,000 people, and they were 9,000 people, they were not 5,000 or 7,000. I have it now reliably from the Kenya Red Cross that 9,000 people were displaced in order to make way for a very, you know, much needed sewage and sanitation program across that part of Nairobi that would affect, you know, hundreds of thousands of poor people in places like Mukuru, Kwanjenga, and so on. That those demolitions can be responded to by hundreds of people, by thousands of people who write letters. And one of the things we did was we immediately put out an urgent action on all our platforms with a template letter that would go straight to the office of the president and to the president of the republic and say, not in our name, you do not demolish homes at this time, particularly at this time, using force in our name. And what was excellent to see was within think 48 hours of the uproar that was there, not necessarily galvanized by Amnesty, but really galvanized by active citizenship, active citizens. The Minister of Interior, Fred Matiang'i, publicly in a meeting with political leaders across Nairobi declared that there would be no more forced evictions for the duration of this COVID period, and that people would be protected against doing this. Now we wait to see whether this will translate into actions on the ground. And also we wait to see whether those people who are now in the cold and were unable to go up country because of the cessation of movement and because of curfew need a place to lay their heads, whether they would too would be protected over this period. But I think as a theory of change, it is people's action that produces the kind of leadership that you see in Makueni, you see showing up in all those examples that I've just given on the chat, where we have seen the state course correct itself. And I think that's what we need to see, is movements of people willing to take action at local, county, and also regional levels. So I'll stop there and just encourage us all to look into ourselves for ways of being active at this point. And the first thing we have to let go of is any sense that nothing will come out of our actions, anything that the government is not accountable for doing anything but protecting people and serving people at this time. Those thoughts, we have to move them to the back of our head, because we will have no power in conversations with the state during this time and beyond COVID.
Thank you so much, Irungu. There's so much to learn from that. I guess for all of us, even just the way we do things, our models, bringing supporters, members, recruitment models. I think that's something that a lot of us can learn from, and even a lot of the listeners here. And I think one of the big aims of this, the Rethinking Democracy discussion is really touching base, learning from each other, also collaborating and seeing how we can support each other's work. Because we are on the same fight, we are on the same side, and the more we put in our energies together, the stronger we all become. So that's been really good to hear from you, Irungu. So we have about 20 minutes to go, and I want to highlight that as towards the end, because I'm going to just now read out some of the charts and some of the questions, is that I'd like to ask our panelists to share probably their contacts. Okay, so just a very quick summary of maybe the organizations that they're with and what they're doing, although I think we've already mentioned that even in the introduction. But so maybe what it would be their own contacts, either on Twitter or Facebook or other social media sites, so that those that want to plug in can be able to plug in. So yeah, I just want to now very quickly read some of what's been happening in terms on the chat. And so first of all, our participants on the chat, thank you so much for writing in. I'm seeing a lot of discussions. I really love and very engaged, very engaged, which is always very, very inspiring to see. So I'm seeing that a lot of people were very happy with Prof's poem. Prof, you're going to be able to see the comments that a lot of people were giving. I'm just very quickly scrolling, so that's why yes. So we have participants, Sambunya, George Nyamwea. George Nyamwea was asking about the youth. Why are the youth more active in voting but not in holding the government accountable? Or do they perceive politics as losing and winning? Are the youth in a vicious cycle where poverty prevents them from actively engaging in politics because they don't have time to engage in grassroots political forums? Reg says, editor, very proud of you. How do you get more young women in active citizenship? There seems to be growing apathy, but also growing dissatisfaction with the state of play. We see a lot of people saying thanks for the poem. Sichard says that the fact that the poem is still relevant is absurd. We've come such a long way, yet are still in the same place. Valinda asks, what are the current limitations to citizens' participation in Kenya? How can they be overcome? And then, so I think we have someone, Grace says, in Uganda, it's illegal to give any donations without the collaboration of the designated district or national task force. We have members of parliament who have been badly beaten up with one fighting for his life. How do citizens navigate the lockdown in upholding their human rights? We have Karaoke saying the government never cares about people because the people do not care to elect a government worth that name. I see someone quoting, according to chapter 14, part 4, do we have to reform the institutions in which the police undertake their education? So there's a lot of comments. I'm not going to read all of them. I'm just very quickly scanning through to see what stands out. Yes, people are talking about the citizenry being informed, and says that as long as citizenry is not informed and don't participate in public processes, it works for them. It works, I guess, for the people in power. And informed people can change things. Anne says Ubuntu philosophy is a real deal. We see Maureen talking about countermeasures, focal point on youth. Muthoni says editor. Talks about localizing the constitution. Mike Hissa says, okay, no. Yes, so there's a lot of feedback, even directly to the panelists, but these are not questions, so I will not go into them right now. But I'll just very quickly share some of the key questions, and then so you can. Some of them are focused on you as a panelist, but others are just open-ended. And Rose, you want to find out where the poem is? I think Prof will tell you where you could probably Google from. Okay, so Marianne says, editor's story is different. It's about succeeding while all odds are against her. What drives her? This kind of inspiration is what all who want to see a better Kenya need, because the journey gets really difficult. So that's a question for you. Editor. Someone anonymous asks, how can I be an active citizen socially and politically from the diaspora? Yeah, actually we have a lot of diaspora members here. We have someone from, I see Didier is from Switzerland. I saw someone else from someone in Europe. Ruth Bolo has a question to editor and Prof. How much does citizens' participation actually contribute in governing and policy making? And I think for now that is what. There's a very good question by Maria. Okay. Oh, there's a question for Kepta. Quick question. How can we ensure that citizens actively participate in development processes of their counties and country at large? Then Miriam asks, Prof, how have you managed to balance politics and leadership? How have you managed to win in the political space yet provide leadership? While at it, you struggled in your first term and you won people over, including those who fought you. How did you do it? And yeah, so we have about 12 minutes to go, so we'll just maybe we could start with Kepta.
Thanks a lot. So very quickly, this would need a whole new conversation.
It would.
But there's something exciting going on, and the editor is part of the social justice movement in this country is doing an absolutely amazing work with the very limited means and the resources. They are mobilizing communities to start articulating themselves on their issues, to start defending their spaces as citizens.
Sorry, Kepta, I'm just going to say it's going to be 2 minutes for each of you. So, sorry to cut you short.
So you probably want to look at what the social justice movement. is doing. The social justice movement is formed by the building blocks are social justice centers, which are very grassroots. They are as local as they can be. And they are growing organically. They are organic. By that, we mean they are building around the issues that are of real interest to the local communities. So it could be housing, it could be issues of access to public services, it could be issues of defending their public spaces, it could be issues of defending their dignity and their lives. For instance, the cases of extrajudicial killings, in the case of editor, it's a question of defending women and girl child rights. So they are formed around organic issues that communities can relate to. And unlike the NGOs of the 90s and so on, which played a very important role in opening up the democratic space, these social justice centers are using community resources. So they're building from down up. Now, once they achieve a critical mass across the country, I am sure that we are going to see something extraordinary in this country, because it will be a revolution, a true revolution of the people, and the system will change. And the revolution is not just about picking guns, it's about the mindset. The moment people believe that they have the power and they can change it and they can own government, things will be totally different. And then talking about active citizenship will make sense.
Thank you so much, Captain. Maybe would you like to say something about how people can plug in, maybe the pages, the social media pages that they can go check out and just get involved? How can people get involved if they want to get involved?
Yeah, that's why I was trying to interest you to create another session where we talk about this movement. Actually, what Professor Kibwana is doing in Makueni, the way he's organizing, it's very much the same. So there are probably formations of the same kind of movement happening, but now the important point is to connect. In the movement, editor will recall this, and we talk about connecting the struggles. So the women who are struggling to get water from 20 kilometers, how do you connect them with the workers who are being exploited in an industrial area? How do you connect them to the people who cannot access water? Even as we are talking about fight against COVID, is about washing hands, but they cannot access water in Kayole. The other day, members of the Kayole Social Justice Center were shamelessly rounded up and locked up for going to the local water office to demand that the community be provided with water so that they can observe the Ministry of Health and the WHO guidelines. How does that even happen? Yorungas, of course, talked about another shameful attack on people in Kariobangi. How do you evict people in the middle of a pandemic if you are a government that is owned by the people and that is responsible? And how do you tell those people to become responsible citizens? How do you tell them to love the country that doesn't love them? So we are trying to change that from the bottom. Personally, I belong to the Elangatawas Community Justice Center, which is based in Kajiado, and there the big issues about land.
Okay.
And it's about
so particularly, we want to now give like details of where can people plug in, where if they go online, what should they look for? Is there like a Twitter handle?
Just in social justice centers, it will give you a whole lot of them. If you go to a lot of them, also have Facebook pages, so you'll be able to see the kind of things, the amazing work they're doing. Even right now in the fight against Corona, you'll see what the artists are doing. You'll see what the graffiti artists are doing. They're doing amazing work within the communities.
Yeah.
You'll see them educating, amplifying the messages, organizing communities to respond from the grassroots.
Okay.
So
Thank you
please
so
give me
much,
time and
Kepta,
organize
because we
the
have 6
conversation.
minutes to go, and Prof and editor haven't said anything. So I'll also plug in that Kenya Tutakayo movement, which Kepta is has been very much at the forefront of, although it's now found its own feet and is right on its own. So if you want to follow up with what is happening, with what he's involved in, you can just Google Zinduka Festival, and now that works with arts and arts, culture, human rights, and Kenya Tutakayo movement and the social justice centers, and you can plug into what Kepta is doing. And so what about, Irungu, maybe you could just for 1 minute just talk about is what Amnesty is doing, are people open to join in and like, I don't know, be part of the movement, or so maybe you could just say something very quick about that. And how
Yes, definitely. So let me just respond to one of the comments that was raised. I can't remember who it was, but somebody said people have stopped caring. Let me just push back and just say, if you are apathetic or have stopped caring, you're probably privileged. Now that might sound a bit rough, and it might sound a bit provocative, but consider that for people whose homes are being demolished, young men who are being hunted by police officers unlawfully, or women that have to go into clinics and neither have the dignity nor the safety of a modern health facility, you have to care. You have to be concerned by those things. It is only those of us who don't have these things breathing down our necks that have the luxury of being apathetic and stopped caring. And I think, to just go on to a different issue that's been raised, how do you get people to care? I mean, I think what we do in Amnesty is we essentially allow people's experiences to be shared publicly. We remind people of what the constitutional safeguards are and the standards of human rights that have been agreed to internationally, and we invite people to take action. And I think that's where we start to see some interesting things happening. So we have a book club that's running at the moment for people who would like to talk and educate themselves on human rights. We have a webinar that's running. About 100 people are on a webinar on understanding human rights issues and how to campaign on whatever it is that is important to them. We have a website, and let me invite you to all turn to amnestykenya.org, which is the website, and also an opportunity for people to become members of Amnesty International Kenya, which hopefully in the next couple of months, for the very first time, we hope to bring hundreds of members together to meet virtually and get some training, have an opportunity to shape our next strategic plan, and also towards the end of the year, elect the executive committee of Amnesty, who will then manage me and the 15 staff that are there. So we are essentially exercising inclusive democracy within our structures, and we look forward at the end of the year to be able to do this despite COVID. I think the last comment I wanted to make is for activists, what I found most useful for me is really trying to avoid talking to people who agree with me only. One of the things that, if I think about the 20 or 30 years that I've been organizing, that really frightens me is that we are getting too used to talking to echo chambers on WhatsApp groups, on Facebook, and we are only willing to dialogue with people who agree with us, people who have the same level of frustrations or have the same perspectives as us. And that's how change doesn't happen. Change happens when you can pull together a consensus across different people who think differently, and they begin to think in the same way and have the same vision. I think
to use military parlance, when you invade new ground.
Yes, visions are also useful sometimes. I have no enemies. This is another thing that I do. I have no enemies in this world, even if they pronounce themselves as enemies against me. I only have people out there that I need to turn into friends and allies in order to protect the Bill of Rights, and in particular, somebody has said, Chapter 43 of our Constitution. Thank you very much for the opportunity to share this evening and to listen and to learn. If you're in the Kalimani area, please join the Kalimani Project Foundation. If you're in the national area, please join Amnesty Kenya.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Irungu. And I'm seeing that we are joined by a lot of our friends and luminaries within the human rights world, the activist world. I've seen, yes, Marianne, Winnie Obure, Tom Okech, Tercia Waroi, and many, many others. So for now, for editor, but Kepta, I know you'll say that I'm not respecting Prof because I'm asking him to speak last, but it's sort of like save the best for last. Am I allowed, Kepta? Kepta is thinking. It's with respect.
I would like editor to speak last, if you
Okay.
allow.
I love that, Professor. I salute you. You're a great, very, very great human being. So, Professor, there's a question asked. Okay, and also now just for the panelists that I think we'll just have to allow us to extend by 5 minutes, just so that Prof and editor can just give their last remarks, and also so that Christoph, we haven't allowed Christoph to say anything, but we shall. But Professor, someone asked a question about politics and leadership, because you have been able to maneuver that space very well, and it's a challenge. It's a challenge for idealists. It's a challenge for people who really want to make change. And you probably will not be able to answer it here right now, but I think maybe for your next article, because I know you have a column, that's a question that probably you could think about addressing. It actually came up last week in the discussion on mentorship, because a lot of young people were saying that I'm an idealist. I just want to change things. I go to the constituency. They demand that I have to bribe them. But if I bribe them, I'm going to go in and I'm going to become a corrupt politician. So what is it? So Professor, that would be so good to just address that, because that's a question so many people are struggling. But for now, maybe you could tell us how can people plug into your current initiatives? I know that there's a whole movement to try to make you the president of Kenya. Is that the next step? Is that what you want us to do? So you can tell us, just because we want that these discussions have some momentum, that we are moving somewhere, that it's not just we've talked and then bye. Yeah, so tell us, and just even bring us on board and this is for all of you panelists, that just bring this energy on board, and because collaboration is really what is going to end. Partnership and support is what changes things. So yes, Professor.
Yes, thank you again. I think there is something that has been talked about, and we haven't also maybe talked about it a lot. This is the role of the youth, because I think this country and Africa really belongs to that young generation. And that is where the investment should be, because when that sector of our population kind of wakes up politically and in terms of citizenship, then we shall begin to see change. And it has to be waking up so that they know the issues, like what editor is doing. Kepta is a little older, but about the same more or less age bracket. Irungu is not too older than them. So it is actually the younger people who should define where they want our continent to go to. And if there was, like, as we go towards 2022, if there was a movement which said youth must not accept to be used in politics, in violence, that would be a very, very great thing, you know. And something that I observed about editor, you know, she's in Kibera all the time. She's with the people there all the time. When they are crying, she's there, you know, maybe not crying, but trying to tell them, don't cry. And if things get too worse, crying a little. But they will go and elect somebody else who perhaps does not come to Kibera as much. And so according to them, they would rather have editor in Kibera because she's there with them and helping them solve the problems, and then take somebody else to Nairobi to the parliament. So again, I think that has also to change, so that what the social justice movements are doing is seen as an avenue for making our country be different. She talked about she had the best manifesto, and yet the people did not believe in that manifesto. And I think we need to start creating those manifestos with the people, so that it is their manifesto. And then you tell them, when you elect me, we are going to implement your manifesto. and you'll be there with me so that you can see whether we are implementing your manifesto. I think that again is important. There was talk of shared vision, and as politicians, we share our vision. That is why we are getting into the government of national unity, because we share our vision. But then these citizens are not sharing a vision, and because we have divided them on negative ethnicity. So until that vision of we want proper implementation of the constitution, we want proper implementation of the devolution, we want active citizenship, so that we can have, you know, change that is good for everybody. Until that also happens, and I think the answer is in what also editors called little networks. Those little networks require to join all similar social justice, the people who really want the constitution implemented, the people who want, you know, people to have livelihood, the people who want people to have, you know, human rights, because those are things the constitution has said we deserve them. And so we are not asking for things that are outside, you know, the legal framework and so on. I think the question of like, why do people just vote and then they kind of you know, disappear and they are not asking for accountability? It is because we have been told you just vote, then government will take over. And that the constitution says it is Wanjiku who is sovereign, who is primary. So again, that has to change. I think that the two other questions of like citizen participation and the governing and the policy making. In our situation, we organize people from the village, and they begin to make their budgets. And even when there are loans to be given, which are concessional, they tell us who. Bursaries, they tell us who. So if you're not afraid of the people, if you think that you are supposed to just facilitate them, then you are not afraid. And therefore, you know, we are now even going to a situation where, of course, we have open contracting, so that any information about contracting is in the open. And we are about to, like when there is, the Auditor General gives us the report, we take it before what we call the County People's Forum. And we tell them that this is what Auditor General said, auditor, about how we have used your money. So, you know, give us a criticism. A Senate gives us, and the County Assembly gives us, because it's your government that we have no interest. And that is why the last question of, although you have asked me to write an article of balancing politics and leadership, I think it's easy, because if you're just an agent of the people, so that they can demonstrate their agency, they can be enabled. You have no really quote self-interest, so that I make money from the county and I do stuff like that. Then it becomes easy, because for me, particularly as a Christian, leadership for me is ministry, and therefore I need to do what will help the people that have asked me, have given me a role of stewardship in Makueni County. And so I like that idea of connecting the struggles of people who want the constitution implemented, who want devolution to succeed. I think that is very, very primary. And Africa's youth has to really wake up and take Africa to the next stage. And I really thank you, KK, my namesake by initials, and Horton, Kepta, editor, and Conrad. Odno, we thank you because you have made this possible. And KK, go places.
Thank you so much. So are we, the presidential campaign, are we doing it, or will be told you will notify us later?
The presidential campaign is when all these social justice movements have been able to themselves crowdsource the ideas, the funds, and all that. and then we look at the Kenyan situation and we see how it is. Then we can ask not only Kibwana, but we can ask like-minded people. We call them and we tell them that, you know, we have all these ideas. Who do you think should take, which group should be led by the people to change things in our country? And it doesn't have to be Kibwana, it can be anybody else, and whoever it is who is identified, we shall support.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor. So we saved the best for last, but there's so many comments for you, editor, just really telling you what an inspiration you are and your inspiring spirit to just keep on going no matter what. So yeah, so just so what is it that we can plug into? What kind of support would us and the participants be able to give to you moving forward? And how can we plug into you? If someone wants to reach out to you to maybe give some donations to help what you're doing, how do they reach you?
Okay, first of all, I'm really privileged. I want to acknowledge this, to be in this panel with intellectual people.
I think we're the ones who are privileged to be with you.
Thank you. And just coming from Kibra University, a school of paperless degree, but a school of experience, a lot of experience has really built me, and also just being privileged to come from Kibra, to be a student and learn so much without going to formal school. Thank you so much, Professor. Thank you so much, Irungu and Kepta. I've really learned a lot from you, and KK for hosting us. So I will go to, Regina asked me a question about what am I going to do with young women. And for me, my mission has been always to nurture young women leadership capacity, to create and open spaces wherever I am, wherever I'm seated as a committee member, wherever I'm seated just as a participant. I'll ensure that I create and open spaces to other young women so that they can engage themselves in different platforms, like socially, economically, and even in policy making processes. And this is the big deal right now in this country. And for young women to realize their potential, which is very important and is very key, so that when we're getting or engaging into these spaces, we know where we are going and we know how we can meet our vision. And also for Ruth Bolo is my friend actually. We are sharing some platform with her, a political platform. She really asked about citizen participation that contributes in governing and policy making. For me, and she asked about how much. For me, there is no much. And I'll just want to refer to the story of a humming bee. On Wangari Maathai's story. It is a very powerful story because we don't need so much. We don't need to strain. We don't need to strain so much so that we can even get sick. We should not do that. But the small things that we do make a huge difference. They create a great impact in the community. And also just urging everyone, we need also to publicize everything. We are living in a good country with good policies, but at the end of the day, everyone wants a private life. Why do you take your daughter to a private school? It means you'll never talk about a public school, which is a school for everyone. So why do you take your son or yourself in a private hospital? It means you'll never talk about a public hospital when people like me are being harassed in a public hospital. So it's upon us as a nation also to ensure that we make everything that we have to be public, so that we can jointly fight for better services and for better future of this country. And also, just for my last point, as young women, let us come together. We need to criticize these spaces, disrupt these spaces all the time. Professor said you're a Christian, and also Christianity and religion has been a big deal, especially to women. I question religion because I want to understand why women are left behind in religion. For example, the Catholic Church, Islamic religion. Why are women not going to mosque and praying with men so that they can get all information, all the big information that men are getting inside there? What is wrong when I become a priest as a woman? So we also need to ask questions in a very questionable spaces for the longest time. We need to influence all the time. And lastly, we need to change. We change everything, make great impact, and change the world positively. Thank you so much for listening to us. And any assistance, we would love. We are Feminists for Peace, Rights and Justice Center in Facebook and at feminist_center in Twitter. We need you, we need everyone. Come with everything that you have. We need your potential. And luckily, we have a different space. You come with what you have, and that is what you offer to the community. We don't tell you what to give in the community because we believe everyone has a different vision. So when you join us, you come with your vision and implement it in our community to make a change. As much as it's a positive thing, we take everything. Yes, for the sake of the community. Thank you so much for listening to me. Thank you, participants. More love and positive energy.
Amen. Thank you. Thanks, editors. And thank everyone, Kepta, Professor, Editor Irungu, for just taking the time to join us. Thank you for sharing all those thoughts. This has been, I like when you begin a discussion and then the thoughts you have at the end of it are just completely different. So I really like this. It's been a thought of thought-provoking ideas and questions. So thank you for just really coming out and being so sharing. And then also for the attendees, our participants who really asked very good engaging questions and have been part of this. So thank you so much. So this discussion was a second of the Rethinking Democracy series that Konrad Adenauer Stiftung is running, and it was geared towards the annual democracy conference. So I actually attended the last Rethinking Democracy conference last year, and it was extremely inspiring because for me, I'm all about political innovation. I'm all about that we have to start doing things differently. We can't keep on doing the same things and expecting. We can't keep on doing the same things and expecting different results. So I find it very interesting what Konrad Adenauer has been doing in terms of just supporting innovation. Like the conference is a space where these kinds of discussions take place and challenges are put. And when people come together, we learn from each other and just really get strengthened. So we'll keep you posted, everyone, panelists as well as participants, about that. Because of the conference was actually meant to be in May, but because of Corona, it was postponed. Christoph and Tim will tell us about what will happen next. So the next discussion next week is not going to focus on rethinking democracy. To be a discussion on IT, but the next one after this will be now the week after, and where we'll be looking at women and gender and the whole question of the why are women still doing so badly in politics? Why are women? Yeah, what is it about this kind of space? So please do tune in and let's keep on talking. Let's keep on doing this. For me, it's that we are moving. We have to get somewhere as a group, as a sector. Our voice has not been strong. So it's time, like we are the ones, we have to be the ones setting the agenda, the national agenda. We're no longer going to be the ones who are continually reacting. So with that, I shall just thank you again for your patience and pass it on to Christoph. Christoph, I'm sorry that we didn't have enough time to include in the discussions.
No worries. Thank you all for participating. Thank you to the amazing panelists for this discussion. Also, a very big thank you for everyone participating in the discussion here on Zoom, in the chat. It's been just as wonderful as the discussion we had here with our videos. Also on Facebook, I've seen there were many comments. People joining in from all over the world, basically. I've seen Ethiopia, Denmark, Switzerland. Thank you all for participating. It was a very interesting discussion. The first very poetic Zoom meeting we had here right now. Maybe Professor Kibuano, you started a trend here and we have a poem on every week. That should be our aim.
Open mic Zoom.
Doing a poetry slam from now on. Tune in next week. We'll be discussing a very pressing topic, health, and what IT and technology can do to support us, not only during this current pandemic, but in general. So a very interesting topic, which will affect all of us somehow, I'm afraid, right now. Tune in then. And then please keep the please keep this discussion going. Also on the social medias, on Facebook, the video will be available there still. Engage on Twitter under the hashtag Rethinking Democracy, hashtag #CasKenya, and we will keep this discussion going. Hopefully we will be able to do the conference still this year. It will be on participation and representation. So there we will continue to facilitate this discussion. And just one thing to conclude, coming from a multinational organization, I think I can confidently say that Kenya has a very strong civil society, and it's a big advantage compared to many other struggling countries all over the world. So we as Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, we support you. We try to facilitate these discussions so that you can make use of the democratic space that there is in Kenya to fix what may be broken in our societies all over the world. That's our mission, that's our vision, and that's why we do have these discussions, and that's why we engage. So thank you all for engaging and doing your part. Have a good evening, and then again, thank you, and see you hopefully next week again. Thank you all.
All right. So we could put off the attendees and then just internally close up with the panelists. Christoph, is it possible?
I don't think so. I think if I close the meeting, it's gone.
Everyone will have to leave. Okay, so well, we'll be in touch, and yeah, we'll be in touch, guys. Okay. All right, have a good evening. Good night.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Thanks very much, and Aluta continua.
Bye-bye. And thank you, KK. Thank you, everybody.
Oh, thank you. Thanks so much.
You wear your mask while sleeping. Mrs.
What's that, sorry?
I'm saying wear your mask all the time.
Okay.